All officers, including captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge. Possibly whole crew dead. I die. In the late 1940s, this frantic, broken message crackled across the radio waves of the Strait of Malacca. It was picked up by multiple listening stations and passing ships. The words were terrifying, but they lacked one critical piece of information. No one knew where the ship was. No coordinates. No name of the vessel was given in the initial call. Just a voice screaming into the dark, followed by a sudden, chilling silence. Hours later, the source of the message was finally located. A Dutch cargo ship was found drifting aimlessly in the calm tropical waters. But when rescuers climbed aboard, they did not find a crew looking for help. Every single person on board was dead. Their bodies lay scattered across the wooden decks, their faces frozen in expressions of absolute terror. And then, before any answers could be found, the ship suddenly exploded, sinking into the ocean and taking its secrets with it forever. This is the story of the SS Ourang Medan. It is a mystery that has baffled historians, scientists, and sailors for decades. What killed the crew? Why were their faces frozen in horror? And did this ghost ship ever actually exist? Or is it a shadow created by history? Let us look at the evidence. To understand what happened, we must step onto the deck of the ship as it was found. The exact date of the discovery is heavily debated. Some historical newspaper reports point to June of 1947. Others claim it occurred in February of 1948, or even as early as 1939. But regardless of the exact year, the details of what the rescuers witnessed remain consistent and terrifying.
According to later reports, the American vessel believed to be the Silver Star arrived at the coordinates of the distress call. The sea was completely calm. The weather was clear. There was no storm, no heavy fog, and no visible damage to the drifting ship. From a distance, the Ourang Medan looked completely normal, but as the rescue ship drew closer, the crew noticed a heavy, unsettling silence. There were no lookouts on the deck. No one responded to the loud horn blasts of the rescue vessel. No flags were raised to communicate. The ship was simply dead in the water, bobbing slowly with the gentle waves of the ocean. Several accounts identify the rescue ship as the Silver Star, whose captain ordered a boarding party to investigate. A small team of brave sailors lowered a wooden lifeboat and rowed toward the silent giant. As they climbed up the rusty side of the hull and stepped onto the wooden deck, they were hit by an immediate sense of dread. The first body they found was lying on its back, staring straight up at the blazing tropical sun. His eyes were wide open, bulging with shock. His mouth was stretched open in a silent scream. His arms were raised with stiff, locked fingers pointing toward the sky, as if he had been trying to ward off an invisible threat before his final breath. As the rescuers explored the corpses, they noticed something highly unusual. There was no blood. There were no wounds, no cuts, and no signs of physical violence. None of the men had been shot, stabbed, or beaten. There were no signs of a struggle. Even the ship's dog, a small terrier, was found dead on the deck. Its body was stiff, its teeth bared in a silent growl directed toward the empty sky. Whatever had killed them had done so quickly, cleanly, and with a level of terror that was written plainly on their dead faces. Let us look at the background of this mysterious vessel. In the Malay language, the word orang means man or person. Medan is a large port city on the Indonesian island of Sumatra. Therefore, the name Ourang Medan roughly translates to the Man of Medan. On paper, she was described as a Dutch cargo ship, but when researchers began digging into the history of the vessel, they ran into a brick wall. Maritime historians have searched the world's most complete shipping records. The most important of these is Lloyd's Register of Shipping. This database has meticulously documented every single merchant vessel since the year 1764. But the name SS Ourang Medan does not appear in Lloyd's Register. It is completely missing. Furthermore, no records of the ship's construction, its crew list, its shipping routes, or its official registration can be found in the archives of the Netherlands, Indonesia, or any other country. How could a massive steam-powered cargo ship simply not exist on paper? Some researchers believe the ship was operating under a false name or a flag of convenience to hide illegal activities. Others suggest that the ship was a highly classified military vessel deleted from official history to protect government secrets. But without an official record, we're left to wonder who built the Ourang Medan, who was sailing her, and what was she actually carrying through the busy waters of the Strait of Malacca.
Let us follow the boarding party of the rescue ship as they moved deeper into the dark, silent corridors of the ghost ship. The rescuers knew they had to find the engine room to see if they could restart the ship's systems or at least determine what had caused the engines to fail. They pushed open the heavy steel doors leading down into the bowels of the vessel. As they descended the metal stairs, they noticed a strange and highly unnatural physical sensation. The weather outside on the ocean was hot and humid, typical of the tropical climate of the Strait of Malacca. Yet, as the men entered the lower decks, later accounts claimed the engine room and deep holds felt unnaturally cold, although this detail has never been independently verified. In the engine room, the massive steam boilers were completely silent. Near the heavy machinery, several crew members were found dead. Like the men on the deck above, their bodies were frozen in extreme terror, their eyes bulging, their mouths open, staring at the empty metal ceilings. The boarding party then moved to the ship's radio room to see if they could find any logs or clues. There, they found the young radio operator. He was slumped over his wooden desk, his lifeless body still sitting upright in his chair. His hand was outstretched, and his cold, stiff finger was still resting directly on the transmitting key of the telegraph machine. He had died while sending the very final message that had brought the rescue ship to their location. He was the one who had tapped out the final, chilling words, "I die." The rescuers looked around for any signs of toxic gas, fires, or structural damage, but the ship seemed physically intact. There was no visible smoke, and the cargo holds appeared secure. Realizing that they could not leave this graveyard of a ship to drift in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, the captain of the rescue vessel made a decision. He ordered his crew to attach a heavy steel towing cable to the bow of the Ourang Medan. The plan was to tow the ghost ship back to the nearest port where authorities and medical experts could perform detailed autopsies on the crew and conduct a proper, thorough investigation. The sailors secured the tow line and returned to the safety of the rescue ship. The engines of the American ship roared to life, and the heavy cable began to tighten, pulling the massive, silent Dutch vessel behind it. But the secrets of the Ourang Medan were not meant to leave the ocean. The investigation was about to be cut short in a sudden, violent way. Just as the rescue vessel began to tow the silent vessel, the crew noticed something alarming. A thick, dark plume of black smoke began to rise from the lower decks of the Ourang Medan, specifically from the area near cargo hold number 4. Within seconds, the smoke grew thicker and darker. The captain of the rescue ship, sensing immediate danger to his own ship and crew, ordered the boarding party to cut the steel tow line immediately. The sailors hacked at the cable, severing the connection between the two vessels. The rescue ship backed away as quickly as its engines would allow, creating a safe distance between themselves and the smoking ghost ship. It was a decision that saved their lives. Only moments after the tow line was cut, a terrifying explosion ripped through the hull of the Ourang Medan. The blast was incredibly violent. Eyewitness reports claimed the force of the explosion was so immense that it actually lifted the massive cargo ship slightly out of the water. A fireball engulfed the bridge and the decks, turning the ship into a burning inferno. The fire raged with intense heat, and within minutes, the structural integrity of the ship failed. The Ourang Medan rolled onto its side and began to sink rapidly. As the crew of the rescue ship watched in silence, the burning vessel disappeared beneath the dark waves of the Strait of Malacca. It sank to the bottom of the ocean, taking the bodies of the crew, the silent dog, and every shred of physical evidence with it.
The physical mystery was gone, buried under hundreds of feet of water. But the scientific quest to explain what had happened was just beginning. Let us look at this case through the lens of science. If the story of the Ourang Medan is true, how could an entire crew die simultaneously without any physical injuries and with their faces frozen in pure terror? To answer this, we must examine the chemistry of dangerous cargo and the physics of the ocean. One of the most prominent scientific explanations involves the transport of highly toxic chemicals. During the late 1940s, many ships carried undocumented, dangerous cargo left over from World War II. It is highly possible that the Ourang Medan was smuggling volatile industrial compounds or chemical weapons through the Strait of Malacca. Two specific chemicals are often mentioned in scientific analyses of this event: potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin. If the ship was carrying a large shipment of potassium cyanide and seawater managed to leak into the cargo holds, a violent chemical reaction would occur. When potassium cyanide reacts with moisture, it produces hydrogen cyanide gas. Hydrogen cyanide is an extremely lethal, fast-acting toxic gas that prevents the body's cells from using oxygen. If this highly toxic gas escaped from the cargo holds and entered the ship's ventilation system, it would have spread through the vessel in minutes. As the crew breathed in the invisible gas, it would cause rapid suffocation. The biological effects of hydrogen cyanide poisoning align remarkably well with the descriptions of the dead crew. When a human is exposed to lethal doses of cyanide gas, they experience severe convulsions and muscle spasms. Because the muscles lock up violently during death, the body can enter a state called cadaveric spasm. This is a form of muscular stiffening that occurs at the exact moment of death. If the crew died of sudden cyanide poisoning, their facial muscles and limbs would have locked instantly. This explains why their eyes were wide open, their mouths were gaping in a silent scream, and their arms were frozen, pointing toward the sky. They were literally frozen in their final agonizing moments of gasping for air. But what about the explosion? This is where nitroglycerin comes into play. Nitroglycerin is an incredibly unstable liquid explosive. It is highly sensitive to changes in temperature and physical movement. If the Ourang Medan was carrying unsecured barrels of nitroglycerin alongside potassium cyanide, a leak in one cargo hold could easily trigger a disaster. As the toxic gas killed the crew, the ship would have drifted aimlessly. Without anyone to manage the engines, the physical movement of the vessel rocking on the waves could have caused the unstable nitroglycerin to shift. Furthermore, if seawater continued to flood the holds, it could cause an exothermic reaction, a chemical process that releases a massive amount of. Once the temperature in the cargo hold reached a critical limit, the nitroglycerin would detonate. This explains the sudden, violent explosion that ripped the ship apart just as the rescue ship attempted to tow it. There is another scientific possibility that does not involve smuggled military weapons: carbon monoxide poisoning.
Every steamship of that era relied on massive coal-fired boilers. If the ship's boiler system suffered a major malfunction, such as a cracked exhaust pipe, highly concentrated carbon monoxide gas could have leaked into the living quarters and engine rooms. Carbon monoxide is completely invisible, tasteless, and odorless. If a leak occurred while the crew was working, they would have slowly lost consciousness and died of asphyxiation. However, carbon monoxide poisoning does not easily explain why the crew members on the open deck, exposed to the fresh ocean breeze, died in the same manner. This brings us to a third scientific theory: an undersea methane gas release. The Strait of Malacca sits atop a highly active geological region. Deep beneath the ocean floor, there are massive pockets of natural gases, including methane. Occasionally, underwater earthquakes can rupture these pockets, releasing a massive bubble of methane to the surface. If the Ourang Medan sailed directly over one of these rising gas bubbles, the gas would completely displace oxygen around the ship. Within seconds, the oxygen level on the deck would drop to zero. Every living creature on board would have suffocated almost instantly. Furthermore, methane is highly flammable. If this gas entered the hot engine room, it would have ignited, causing a delayed and massive explosion that would destroy the vessel. From a scientific perspective, the physical evidence of frozen horror and sudden death can be fully explained by chemistry and physics. But science only works if we are analyzing a real event.
Let us step away from pure science and enter the world of investigative history. There are several major theories regarding the true nature of the Ourang Medan. Each theory attempts to explain the gaps in the official records. The first major theory is the secret military cargo hypothesis. In the years following World War II, the world was entering the Cold War. Major powers were actively securing, transporting, and sometimes destroying chemical and biological weapons. During the war, a notorious Japanese military unit known as Unit 731 had conducted biological weapons research in occupied China. When the war ended, much of this highly toxic material had to be moved in absolute secret. According to this theory, the Ourang Medan was an unregistered ship hired to secretly transport these dangerous chemical agents out of China. Because the cargo was highly illegal under international treaties, the ship's registry was deliberately erased. This would explain why there is no record of the ship in Lloyd's register. It was a black project vessel. If a container of these experimental nerve agents ruptured, the crew would have been exposed to a weapon far more lethal than standard industrial chemicals, freezing them in their final moments. The second theory involves pirates. The Strait of Malacca has been one of the most pirate-infested waterways in human history. Could the Ourang Medan have been attacked by pirates who used poison gas to neutralize the crew? While this theory is dramatic, it fails to explain why pirates would leave the cargo untouched and why there were no signs of physical struggle or theft. This brings us to the third theory, the hoax theory.
Many maritime historians believe that the SS Ourang Medan never existed at all. When we trace the origin of the story, we do not find official naval reports or Coast Guard logs. Instead, we find the work of an Italian journalist named Silvio Scherli. The earliest known mention of the Ourang Medan appeared in October of 1940 in an Italian newspaper called Il Piccolo. Scherli, who worked as a freelance writer and a maritime radio operator, wrote a series of highly dramatic articles about mysteries of the sea. Years later, in February and March of 1948, the story appeared again in a Dutch-Indonesian newspaper called De Locomotief. In these articles, a highly detailed narrative was presented. According to one newspaper account, a German survivor allegedly escaped the SS Ourang Medan in a lifeboat before it exploded. According to this story, This survivor allegedly drifted for thousands of miles across the ocean until he washed ashore on the remote Taongi Atoll in the Marshall Islands. There, he was found by a Christian missionary. Before the German sailor died, he told the missionary the entire story of the ship, its toxic cargo, and the horrific death of its crew. Then, the missionary passed this story to Silvio Shirley, who published it. However, historians point out major flaws in this narrative. The distance between the Strait of Malacca and the Taongi Atoll is over 5,000 miles. It is physically impossible for an injured man in a small lifeboat to survive a 5,000-mile drift across the open Pacific Ocean without food or water. Furthermore, the editors of the Locomotive actually included a disclaimer stating that they had no official data to back up the story and that it might simply be a thrilling romance of the sea. Yet the legend was so powerful that it quickly spread. In 1959, a citizen named C.H. Mark Jr. wrote a letter to the director of the United States Central Intelligence Agency, Allen Dulles. In the letter, Mark described the story of the Ourang Medan and suggested that the tragedy might hold the key to other unexplained disappearances at sea. Because the letter was sent to the CIA, it was kept in their official archives. When these archives were declassified decades later, researchers found the document. Many people mistakenly believed this was an official CIA investigation, when in reality, it was simply a piece of public mail filed away by the agency.
Let us rate the likelihood of these theories using a scale from 1 to 5 stars. First, the media hoax theory. This rates a full 5 stars out of 5 for likelihood. Given the absolute absence of the ship in official registers and the physically impossible survival story of the German sailor, it is highly likely the story was an embellished maritime legend created by Silvio Shirley. Second, the toxic cargo smuggling theory. We might rate this as a 4 out of 5 stars for likelihood. It could explain the reported deaths and the subsequent explosion, but the complete lack of official shipping records makes it extremely difficult to verify. Finally, the pirate attack theory. We must rate this at only 1 star out of 5. It completely fails to explain the lack of physical wounds, the untouched cargo, and the subsequent explosion. Let us summarize the mystery of the SS Ourang Medan. We are left with a riddle that may never be solved. If we believe the story is real, we must accept that a ghost ship sailing with a highly volatile top-secret cargo suffered a catastrophic chemical leak that wiped out its entire crew in a matter of minutes. The subsequent explosion erased all physical proof, leaving us with only the frantic radio signal. If we believe the story is a myth, we must credit the incredible imagination of Silvio Shirley and the power of mid-century media to turn a fictional tale into an enduring maritime legend. Both possibilities are fascinating. One represents a terrifying disaster of science and military secrecy, while the other shows how a well-crafted story can capture the imagination of the entire world, even finding its way into the archives of the CIA. Why does the debate continue? Because the ocean is vast, silent, and holds many secrets. Without finding the actual physical wreck of the ship at the bottom of the Strait of Malacca, we can never know the absolute truth. Maybe the SS Ourang Medan carried a deadly secret, or maybe it never existed at all. Until undeniable evidence is recovered from the bottom of the Strait of Malacca, one haunting question will remain. Who sent that final message? I die.